everyone, I'm Amy. You've probably seen my channel before and seen that I interview some amazing authors. In case you haven't, I usually review YA books, review horror, and get brilliant people like FRAN HART to come on and talk to me about their books. So Fran is the author of one of my favourite books that I've read this year. The other ones, I was really lucky to read an early copy of it and blurb the book. So I was so glad when I messaged Fran to see if she'd like to come on, and she said yes, fortunately. And so thanks so much for joining us, Fran.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you for asking me.
It's really, really nice to talk to somebody when I think when you've read somebody's book and enjoyed it so much, I kind of just want to pick your brain about it now and know like where you got your ideas from and all of that. So do you want to start by telling us a little bit about the book?
Yeah, so The Other Ones is a ghostly YA love story. So it centers around Sal, who lives in a haunted house, and the unlikely friendship he develops with the new boy in town, Pax. So the book has elements of a ghost story, but I would say it's probably more about being different and finding your place in the world. That's definitely how I approached writing it.
Oh, that's lovely. And I'm glad that you I think the relationship part was the thing that really stood out for me. And I've seen it compared to Heartstopper a lot and to Gilmore Girls. And I think that those two things kind of are all about the relationships and the characters. So can you tell us a little bit about how you approached developing the characters and making them realistic? I have to say Pax might be my favourite. I just love him. And now when people ask me what character would you steal from another book and put them in yours, I was like, Pax. That's my answer going forward now. So yeah, how did you go about creating characters that were like that people really care about and that seem really real?
Yeah, so I think I approached it differently for different characters. So when I first started writing the book, I started with the two main characters who are Sal and Pax. So I planned those two out quite carefully. I did sort of lots of like character building worksheets and character quizzes and all those things where you sort of fill in all the details and what they look like and what their voice sounds like and everything like that. But then other ones kind of just appeared as I was writing, which was quite nice. I think that's one of the nicest things about writing a book, I find, is when you get a character that's really working, they kind of almost start to write themselves into it. So characters like Asha, who is my favorite character in the book, she pretty much sprang out of nowhere and wrote herself in. Excellent,
doing all the work for you. I like that.
Yes, exactly.
So were characters your starting point for writing then, or did something else what was that initial impetus to write this book?
Yeah, it was a bit of a spur of the moment thing, to be honest. I decided to do NaNoWriMo in 2019. And at the point I decided to do it, I didn't have an idea. So I very much sort of decided to write a book and then thought, what do I want to write about? So yeah, I started with the characters. I knew I wanted to have one character who is just unapologetically weird. And then another character who wants nothing more than to be completely normal. So I started with those two characters and kind of thought, how would that relationship develop? How would they help each other? And yeah, that was the starting point.
So I think another thing I've seen people say about your book that they really like is that, and obviously you can tell from the cover design is beautiful and the little Halloween touches. I think people really like the spookiness and the kind of ghostly angle. So what was it that made you decide to go down that path with it?
Yeah, I think it helps that it was written in November because obviously it had just been Halloween.
Okay,
I'm a Halloween fan anyway. Absolutely love it. It's my favorite holiday. I love autumn as well. It's my favorite season. Just everything about it, sort of cold weather, crunchy leaves, comfy knitwear. So yeah, it's just a bit of a love letter to autumn, really. It's yeah,
that's probably why people like it so much. I think I've talked to quite a lot of authors about this kind of thing, and I think the books that tend to work for people, you mentioned beforehand that this is your first book, which is amazing, like as in first book at all that you've tried writing. But people seem to find that the books that do well and resonate are the ones that have the stuff in that you love as well. And did you find that you enjoyed writing it as a result of that, or is writing a bit of a way for you? It's a bit of both for me. I can either love it or find it a bit of a chore.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think because I was writing it for NaNoWriMo, I knew, and I can't remember what the word count is now per day, but it's
Is it
it's something.
1,700 or something?
Yeah,
Like
it's something like that. It's high.
Yeah.
So I knew it needed to be something that I would enjoy writing. So I did just put everything that I love into it, and that helped sort of sitting down every day and starting to write, because I was excited to write about what I was writing about.
Oh, I think that definitely comes across. So I've mentioned that obviously you had different genre elements, like you've got the romance and then you've got the spookiness. Did you find that there was a favorite type of scene or like genre feel that you preferred? And the flip side of that, was there anything where you thought, oh God, I've got to write one of these scenes now? Like, did you have certain favorites or least favorites to write?
Yeah, definitely. So I love writing characters, and I actually find plotting quite difficult. So the bits that I most enjoy writing were definitely sort of just the fun sort of character interaction scenes. I loved writing the romance. That was loads of fun. And then developing the friendships as well. I think the friendships in the book, for me at least, are sort of as important as the romance. So yeah, I had a lot of fun with that. But it's not just a romance, it's also got this sort of ghost story going on as well. And there's a bit of mystery there too. And that was also lots of fun to write, but I found it much more difficult, because there's just, I think, so much more to think about. You've got to make sure that everything is working in the right place. And yeah, there was a lot of, I spent a lot of time putting it together and then unpicking it and trying it in different ways. And yeah, it was a long process. I think it paid off in the end.
It definitely did. So did you get the whole draft written then during NaNoWriMo?
I did, yeah. It was a shorter draft. So I think the aim is 50,000 words, and I wrote, I think, pretty much exactly 50,000 words. I got to 50,000 words and I thought, yes, I've done it. But obviously that's not, usually it's not long enough to be sort of a publishable YA novel. So I kind of kept going back to it over the following few months, and adding bits in and extending bits that needed extending. And it is actually still quite a short book. I think it's somewhere around 62,000 words. But yeah, there was definitely a lot that went into it after Nano had finished.
So what did you do once that editing process was done for you? What was the next step? How did you go from that to published book?
Yeah, so I kind of I thought I'll try and get this published, but it's probably not going to happen. But I'll give it a go. And the first place I thought to try was the Times Chicken House competition, which I had heard of before. And I knew that sort of another route was approaching agents and querying. But I thought I'll start with this competition, and then if nothing comes of it, I'll look into querying and approaching some agents. But I got very, very lucky, and I got longlisted for the competition and then shortlisted. And then I think it was in October of 2020, sometime in the autumn anyway, I found out that I had won the Chairman's Choice Award.
Oh, brilliant.
Which is sort of the second prize for the competition. And that comes with a publishing contract as well. So yeah, at that point I knew it was going to be published with Chicken House.
Oh, amazing. That's such an interesting route into it, because I think the kind of perception is that you either are going to self-publish or you're going to be very small published, or to get down the traditionally published route with a big publisher, that you will have to have an agent. So it's nice to hear a story of different ways into it. So do you have an agent now, or are you kind of continuing on the unagented route for now?
I do have an agent. That was part of the prize for the competition. You get an introduction to an agent, and obviously the opportunity to sign up with them if you want to, which I did, which I'm really glad I did, because it's really nice having sort of someone in your corner, I guess.
Yeah, I always recommend it to people because there's so many times, not just the fact that Sandra has got all my deals for me, but just the things that I need to bounce off her. Like I've done bits of freelance writing and just been able to ask her questions and kind of just to kind of shape my career with me, I think. And we talk a lot about what I'm going to do next and kind of the progression of me as an author. And I don't think I would have that direction without her and all that knowledge that they provide. I just think it's so valuable.
Yeah, definitely. It really is. Yeah. And they can give you sort of, when I first got into the publishing world, I knew absolutely nothing about it. So it was really nice to have someone that I could go to and sort of ask those questions, and who knew everything about publishing, sort of. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I knew a bit because I was a blogger before, and then I became a YouTuber at a similar time that I became an author. But I don't think I knew the kind of ins and outs of it and how people say, oh, publishing takes a long time. I don't think I realized how long it takes. And I didn't realize the intricacies of everything they do. So yeah, I definitely won't be able to do without Sandra, certainly, because there's things you don't have access to without them. And then I think, like you said, the knowledge and support that they give is just really valuable as well. So I just realized I'm still fidgeting with your book. It's like, I'm going to put it down. Otherwise, you're going to see little orange flashes in front of the screen. So let's check where I got up to in the questions. So you mentioned a little bit that you did NaNoWriMo. Do you think then that you're more of a pantser than a plotter, or did you plot the book out as you were going along?
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit of both, to be honest. So I decided to do it in the middle of October. So I had a couple of weeks to sort of do the planning. So I did some very rough planning in that time. But then when I actually started writing, I sort of realized this isn't enough to actually get me through the entire book. So I kind of plotted as I went. I had kind of like an ongoing plan, which I always had next to me, and sort of a table of what happens when. So I was constantly moving stuff around on that. And then sort of adding to it as well. If sort of I wrote a scene sort of at the beginning and thought, oh, that would, I need to come back to that at the end, it would go in the plan then. So yeah, it was definitely a bit of a mix.
I think it often is for a lot of people. I mean, some people are the exception, like they do. Bryony Pierce does a whole chapter outline, as in she knows the whole book, how it will go before she writes it. And I think Melissa Oliver was saying that her outlines are like tens of thousands of words long. So she ends up, I don't know if she said it was over 10,000 words or maybe even 20. So that then it's just a case of fleshing that out into a book. Whereas I do more what you do. I do a bit of a rough outline to the end, then I get really excited and start writing it, realise I back myself into a corner, so I have to unpick something and then carry on writing. The book I'm writing now, I've written about 55,000 words. I was like, I can't write the ending because I've got to just go back and fix too many things now. So I end up abandoning and going back to edit, and a lot of back and forth. And it all turns into a book in the end, doesn't it? But
yeah, exactly. I do think that for my next one, I'll probably do more plotting than I did for the other ones. Just because, like you said, if you can write yourself into some problems if you don't know where you're going.
I think it can be really painful, can't it?
Exactly.
Well, like I am 50,000 words into something.
Yeah, I find editing quite difficult, so it would be nice to have less to go back and fix at the end, I think.
So we mentioned just before we went live that you have a day job and that you design during the day, and then obviously you have to fit writing around that. Do you have any advice of how you did that? Because obviously you wrote your first book in such a short space of time. How did you manage to do it?
Yeah, well, I was quite lucky actually when I was writing the other ones. I was in a different job at the time, and I was only working 4 days a week. So I did still write every day. I think you kind of have to for Nano to sort of to keep on top of it. But if I got behind, I had that kind of I had that extra day at the weekend which I could catch up with. So that was really nice. But it's really difficult when you're working and trying to write at the same time. I usually write in the evenings just because that's when my brain works better. So I think you've got to find the time of day when writing comes easiest to you, I think, and work with that. I think when I was writing the other ones, I was quite often writing at sort of 11 or 12 at night, and sometimes up to sort of the early hours of the morning.
Yeah, I think for me it has to be about discipline, because I mentioned to Fran before that I can only write during the evening, and I'm not really a night person. Like when it gets 10 o'clock, my brain goes, nope, I'm done for today. So I really have to write between like 7:30 and 10. So it's kind of just knowing I need to write about that. If I write about 1,000 words a day, then in not too many months there'll be a book. That's my way of thinking it, because I think if I did any less, it would just take too long, and any more I know I can't physically do. So
yeah,
this book has come out in 1,000 words a day, and I think going forward that's probably, at least while I'm working as well, I think that's good for me. So
yeah.
I don't know, I guess it is the NaNoWriMo way of doing it, sort of, but on a bit of a longer scale.
Yeah, I think that sounds quite nice actually, because 1,600 a day is a push, but yeah, I think 1,000 sounds more manageable.
Yeah, occasionally I write more and I'm surprised. I do writing and reading sprints sometimes, and I find that like sitting and somebody looking at me, because we use StreamYard, and writing for 40 minutes under a bit of pressure and then having a break to chat to people and writing for 40 minutes, that's really good too. Sometimes I look at the end of that and I think, wow, I've written 2,000 words just by feeling accountable because of the people there. So I think anything you can use to trick your brain, like you said, finding a good time of day, finding a daily word count, finding a situation that puts you under a bit of pressure, I think all of it is really, really useful.
Yeah, definitely. I found it quite helpful as well to sort of to skip around a bit. I know some people write sort of purely chronological. I did write pretty much chronologically, but if I was struggling with a scene and I wanted to hit my word count for the day, I literally just move on to the next one, and go back to whatever was causing me problems later.
So what did you do did you write like a placeholder note or something in the place where you'd
Yeah,
miss something?
exactly.
Yeah,
Or I would even just write it out sort of, but really badly, and just leave myself a note saying fix this later. Yeah, I found that really helped, because otherwise you can get bogged down and sort of stuck on one thing, and if you spend too long on something as well, you can almost talk yourself out of keeping going. I think if I hadn't done it for NaNoWriMo, I don't think I would have necessarily finished it, because I think because I was writing so quickly, I didn't stop to overthink it. I just got to the end and then thought, now what do I need to do to make it better?
Yeah, I think that's a good way of doing it, because there's a lot of self-doubt, isn't there, with writing? Do you find when you're writing that you get that little voice that says, is this going to be good enough? Is anybody going to read it?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think so many writers have that problem, and it can really like actually stop you writing. So yeah, that's why you've just got to push through it, I think, and not worry too much about whether or not it's good. When I was writing the other ones, I was just writing it for myself. I thought I wanted to write something fun and something that makes me laugh. And I don't care if the writing's good. I just want to get the words down on the page, and then hopefully it will be good at the end of it. But if it's not, it doesn't matter. And I've still had a good time writing it.
It's very good, in case anybody has any doubt. It really is. So obviously writing a first book kind of has its challenges, doesn't it? Because you've never done it before and you're kind of figuring it out. You're at the point where you're thinking about a second book. Would you say that feels more difficult, as difficult, kind of the same? What's your thoughts on it so far?
Yeah, it's really, really different. Because obviously when I wrote the first one, no one was expecting me to write one. In fact, most people didn't even know I was writing it until it was either finished or published.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So, but now there's definitely there's a little bit of pressure and expectation. So it's definitely a different process. But on the other hand, it's nice because I've got people around me now. So I've got people to bounce ideas off, and can sort of get an opinion on something before I get started on it, which is really nice.
Yeah, that definitely helps. I mean, I know some people write a book and then literally send it to their publisher and nobody else reads it, and they don't get much feedback. But for me, I found that having beta readers that I really trust and having my agent read stuff, and my husband reads everything too, several times, sometimes more than several. So do you have a certain circle of people that tend to read it now, tend to read things beforehand?
Yeah, it tends to be my family, to be honest, because we're all big readers. So my mum is a huge reader. And she was actually the first person to read the other ones, and she gave me my first lot of editing notes.
All right, brilliant.
And then my sister as well. She's a massive reader, and she always has really good feedback. So they are definitely my two main people. And then obviously I've got sort of my agent who gives amazing feedback, and my editor at Chicken House as well, who was brilliant the whole way through.
Oh, it's really good to have, I think, people at every stage of the journey that can support and kind of help to shape it. Because for me, the book definitely isn't all me. I feel like it's a product of that back and forth is really useful. So what was the other thing I wanted to ask you? So I was going to ask you, in terms of, you mentioned that you're a big reader. Do you read mostly YA then? Because obviously that's what you end up writing, or do you tend to read a variety of things?
Yeah, I do. Now I do read mostly YA. When I was a teenager, I didn't tend to read YA. I read sort of above my age, really. I think I thought I needed to read sort of big, impressive books. But then when I got into my 20s, I sort of had a bit of a reading slump, and I needed something to get me back into it. So I tried YA then and got completely hooked. I thought, this is brilliant. I should have been reading this the whole time.
Same here. And it was Twilight. I bought Twilight when I was on holiday one year in America. And I just went back to the mall the next day because I'd finished it 24 hours later. I was like, I need the next 2 books in this series. Can you remember what the first YA books were that kind of got you back into it?
No, I can't. I think it was probably The Perks of Being a Wallflower.
Oh yeah, that's so good.
I think that was probably one of the first YA books I ever read. And yeah, I kind of went from there, I think.
Have you seen the movie adaptation of that? Because I've read the book once a long time ago, but I've watched the film quite a few times, and I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, I love the film. I do. I think they did a really good job on it. I've heard people say that they're not keen on it, but no, I think they did a good job. I love that one.
Yeah, I tend to be quite critical. I think if I really like the book, I think the film has to be really good to measure up. And in that one, I actually kind of feel fairly equally about them. And like I said, I've seen the film more, so maybe that means, I do like it more. So do you continue to read a lot of YA? Is my kind of first part of the question. The second part, is there any that you can recommend to people who like your kind of books? You think that they should read too?
Yeah. So yes, I still read loads. Probably my all-time favorite YA author is Benjamin Alire Sainz.
Oh, hang on. Tell me what you wrote, and then I'll tell you whether I've read them.
He wrote Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe.
Yes. Okay, I did love that. Yeah.
Yes, which is my all-time favorite YA book. So I would recommend that one to everyone. I think lots of people have already read it because it's a bit of a classic of the YA genre at this point. I also really love Alice Oseman, who I know loads of people will already have read because of Heartstopper, which is incredible. I think her novels are brilliant as well. Loveless is one of my absolute favorite YA novels. And then I think if you liked the other ones, then I would say try Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas, which is just an amazing sort of spooky read. And I also read a lot of graphic novels. So I would say Sheets by Brenna Thumler, which is a ghosty graphic novel. It's set in a laundrette, and the ghosts are made of sheets. So it's really cute. And
that sounds lovely.
Yeah. And then I really love Pumpkinheads as well by Rainbow Rowell. I think that's a great one.
I've just read that. I read that. I kind of meant to read it in October and just slipped and read it into November. But it's just so sweet and comforting, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. I love that one. It's just a real sort of feel good book, and you can race through it as well, which I always love in a book.
Oh yeah, me too. Especially if I feel, because I do YouTubing and stuff. Sometimes I'm like, I look at how many books I've read in a month, and I think one quick get a graphic novel out, and I'll feel a bit better about my reading for this month. So you mentioned that Alice Oseman is one of your favourites. How did it feel then? Because I know I wrote in my comparison of your book, I compared it to Heartstopper. What did you think when the first person said, "Oh, this is like Alice Oseman's books"? Like, what did that feel like?
Yeah, that's a really amazing feeling, to be honest, because she is sort of one of the reasons I wanted to have a go at writing a book myself. I think it was the summer before I did NaNoWriMo. I read everything she's ever written, and I thought I'd love to have a go at doing this. So yeah, it's
Oh, that's
definitely
amazing that she inspired
yeah,
it, and people have then come out comparing you to it. What do you think
yeah.
it is about your books and hers that what has made people draw that comparison, do you think?
Yeah, well, what I love about her books is they're so character focused, and that's the kind of book I like to read generally as well. I'm not. I like a good plot, but I'm not sort of that invested in it. If I like the characters, I could quite happily just read about them sitting down and having dinner.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of the book I wanted to write as well. Something that was about characters and about the relationships they build.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. Because as I was reading it, and Heartstopper just popped into my head. Yes, it has a male central relationship between two boys, but I think it was about the wider group too. The fact that there are these characters who cannot play a huge role in the book, and yet still seem very real and still seem like important in the character's journey. So yeah, if that's what you're going for, then definitely you hit the mark, because that was why I kind of put that into my comparison of it. So I think I've asked you just about everything I was going to, but I'm going to throw a little wildcard question at you. So in your next book, you are going to compose it of characters from other people's books. Who would you pick to write a kind of the other one's S book? Who would you put in there with your sorts of characters?
Oh wow.
Can go completely on instinct, don't worry too much about thinking it through.
Yeah. Oh gosh. I would definitely take Dante from Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the
Yeah.
Universe. I can't remember her name. Oh, I can. I think it's Frances, the main character from Radio Silence.
Yeah, I think it is.
By
Yeah.
Alice Oseman. I think it's Frances. Yeah, she's one of my favorite characters, so I'd maybe throw her in too. I don't know. Apart from that,
No, they're good. I'd go with those two. I think they would fit nicely
yeah,
into your world.
yeah, that would be a good
In your,
starting point.
is it mean to ask you if you have a favourite character? Because I've mentioned that Pax is my favourite. So you mentioned, is it Alana? What's
Asher.
Alara? Oh, Asher. Sorry, I don't know where I got that from. So do you have any other favourite characters that you really enjoyed writing?
I do love Pax. Everyone says they love Pax, which is really, really nice. But he's not my favorite. I think. Well, Asher is my absolute favorite, and then I think it's probably Sal. He's quite grumpy, which made him really fun to write, and I think it offsets Pax nicely as well, because Pax is never grumpy. He's very much sort of the sunshine character.
Yeah, that seems to be quite a popular trope. I've seen that grumpy sunshine thing that people have mentioned. I didn't realise that was a thing until recently. But yeah, definitely, if you're looking for a grumpy sunshine book, they are. I think that's one of the joys of that relationship, that they sort of balance each other out, and the sunshine things in Pax bring out different qualities in Sal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I was going for, and it's just fun to write. I think that sort of grumpy sunshine relationship.
Did you find that either of them were easier to write than the other? Because obviously they're so different in terms of their dialogue and things. Did one of them come more naturally, or did you find that they just were both there?
I found they both came very naturally. I think I would have struggled to write it otherwise. But no, I found them both very easy to write, and sort of the scenes between just the two of them when they're talking to each other were probably sort of the quickest ones to write for me. There were definitely characters that I found much more difficult to write, but yeah, Pax and Sal I found easy the whole way through.
So which ones were more difficult for you? Can you remember from that many years ago?
Yeah, so Dirk, who's one of the main friend group, I found quite tricky. I think that's just because he's really different to me. He's definitely the most extroverted of the friend group, and he's very sort of loud and sporty. So I found him a little bit more tricky to write. And then, trying to say without giving too much away, but I found Sal's mum very difficult to write as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I won't go into why on that because we'll get into some spoilers.
Yeah, we'll let people. That's why there's certain areas of this book that I don't want to talk about, because I think people just need to read them, because I think the mystery, doesn't it, hangs over this book about the house they live in, but you obviously need to read it and kind of unpick that for yourself.
Yes, exactly.
I'll not say any more about that. So I tend to end by saying, what are you kind of planning to do next? You said that there's a second book. Are you very much at the early stages of this one?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm literally in the idea generation phase. So I've got sort of 2 or 3 possibilities which I'm kind of playing around with, and thinking which do I want to go with, and which one's going to work best, and that kind of thing, and starting to develop some characters as well, which is always really good fun.
Oh, it's exciting. Well, I know, obviously take your time to write it, but I personally can't wait for whatever you write next. I'm sure it'll be brilliant. Well, thank you so much for that. I knew I would enjoy chatting to you, and there's so many things I wanted to know about the book, and thank you for sharing your publication journey as well. I hope it's interesting for people that there are lots of ways into publishing, and that's not one. I have heard of that competition, but I don't think I've ever met one of the winners before, so you're the first one to kind of explain it to me. So that was it, my interview with Fran. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm assuming if you watch this, you might already be interested in Fran's book, but if you haven't read it yet, here it is. It's absolutely gorgeous. I mean, I don't know whether the Waterstones still have these, but this is the Waterstone special edition. It's Halloweeny, it's spooky, fun, it's got gorgeous relationships, so I really think that you should give it a go. So thanks again, Fran, for that. Thank you everyone for watching, and we're going to finish it here, and I will keep picking Fran's brains after, but I'm sorry you don't get to hear that part of it. So thank you everyone for watching, and I hope you will keep watching. In future there will be plenty more authors and reviews to come. Thank you.